Welcome to the Galen Hour. This is season 9, and in this season, we're going to be focusing on graduate research topics, specifically focusing on digital assets and the future of financial services in Belize. Right? Normally, we have Miss Diana Perfit who hosts the show, but she's under the weather and she has asked me to step in. Um, so I am looking forward to this discussion. So good night. It's really a pleasure to be back with the Galen Hour. This season, right? We look at research findings of several graduate students from Galen University and other people. But for us at Galen, we are focusing on the graduate students from the Faculty of Business and Entrepreneurship, the graduate students in a master's degree in business administration. And tonight in the studios, we have representing that faculty, the graduating class of, well, she will tell you that, is Miss Gladys Urbina. Miss Gladys Urbina is the COO of a bank, Key International Bank, right? She's also the president of the Belize International Financial Services Association. And beside her is Hero Balani, right? He's not a Galen graduate. As a matter of fact, he was educated in the UK, the University of Manchester. He has a master's degree from that. He also has another master's degree from a university in Costa Rica. And he is the CEO of an organization, an agency called Finance Belize, the CEO of that agency. So they are our guests tonight, and we are going to be talking digital assets, the future of financial services in Belize. All right. This show, of course, is produced by Galen University. The Galen Hour showcases Galen's commitment to academic excellence, supports sustainable development, and fosters a culture of lifelong learning. All right? So stay tuned, and we will be right back.
Oftentimes, it only takes a spark to ignite the fire that burns inside of us. At Galen, we're committed to academic excellence, and our student-centered service is available to all our Eagles. You too can become a Galen Eagle.
Hello, my name is Jarrell Velasquez, and on behalf of Galen University, I would like to extend an invitation for men to come back to school. Young, old, near, far, wherever you are.
It all starts with a question. What if I really could become a Galen Eagle? And suddenly, the answer feels closer than ever. Get your eagle on. Come soar with the Galen Eagles.
Hi, my name is Trudy Joseph. I'm a procurement specialist consultant. My decision to pursue a master's degree in business administration at the Galen University has provided me more opportunities on my career path. The courses were very practical and applicable. Our cohort worked together for each of us to be able to achieve our academic goals. The mentorship provided the necessary guidance and support. My degree has aided me to be more rounded and versatile. You too can be a proud Galen Eagle.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome back. And I am delighted that Gladys and Hero have been able to sit with us tonight to discuss this very, very, very important issue of digital assets, right? So my first question is, how would you define digital assets in the context of Belize's financial sector? How would you define? We'll first start with Gladys, and then we'll go to Hero. How would you define it?
Sure. Well, Mr. Bauer, thank you for having us. It's a pleasure meeting you. And so overall, digital assets are pretty much items that are the value exists in electronic form, and these can be traded, owned, or transferred, just like money or property, but digitally, right? And when it comes to, and examples of these are cryptocurrencies, like I'm sure you've heard of Bitcoin or Ethereum being the major ones. And then there are, of course, stable coins and tokenized assets as well, right? And I would say that in Belize's context, it is pretty much the next stage when it comes to modernization.
Okay.
Yes.
Why do you say that? It's pretty much the next stage.
It is. It is because it's, it just brings our financial system into a modernization. It brings us up to speed with the rest of the world, with the global economy. And that's in various ways. Digital assets are just so easily transferable and are just being used worldwide so commonly and easily that if we don't start adapting, we will be left behind.
We will be left behind.
Yes.
Yep.
So Hero, what's your take on that in terms of that same question there in terms of defining digital assets in a Belizean context?
Well, I think.
And if you could add what forms of digital assets are currently relevant or are currently emerging in Belize?
Sure. Well,
Because a lot of us are still stuck with the paper money, right?
right, exactly. Well, I mean, one thing I will start with is that when we talk about digital assets, we're not referring to the currency that's in your bank account. You might think, okay, I can send funds to you. You might think that's digital, online banking, right? But that's tied to what's called a fiat currency, backed by a central bank. But when we speak about digital assets again, or even cryptocurrency, this is again phenomenally new and innovative that honestly, the cryptocurrency movement really started around 2009 when Bitcoin was invented. But even, I would say, in 1998 was one of the first forms of digital assets. So really, we're looking at about 15 years in the making. But as Gladys said, in terms of being the next phase of modernizing financial services in Belize, this is really where the world is going. And so for us in Belize, if we don't move now, we'll be left behind in this area. But I think in terms of the different types, I think Gladys kind of hinted at some. Cryptocurrency is one of the most, one that's known about globally, right? That's really one of the buzzwords. We hear about it. And again, all of this technology is tied to blockchain, which we can speak more about in a few. Yes. But the second type is what we call stablecoin. Now, stablecoin is a type of digital asset that's tied to a currency like the US dollar. But the third type that I think is very interesting is tokenization, right? Now that version, you can think about it like you can have digital assets in land or in digital art and different areas. So I think it's really an opportunity for Belize. And even if you think about it in terms of entrepreneurship, which is another area we continue to push. But imagine you have an artist that creates a piece of art, but that wants to sell it digitally. Digital assets and these technology can enable that. So where that artist doesn't only have to sell you that beautiful painting on the wall in your home, but you can own digital rights or a digital piece of that art. So it's really moving into innovative ways of the future. And it goes beyond just cryptocurrency, which is what everyone often thinks about. Yeah. But digital assets, I think Gladys in her research can share more. The gamut of digital assets moves along that spectrum, right? So it's not just the currency, but you can look at assets like land, you can look at assets like art, and different areas. So I hope that helps to explain a bit more. Yeah.
Yes, it certainly helps to explain it to me. Ms. Gans, this question here is for you. It's a sort of a follow-up from that, right? Mm-hmm. How would you describe the current level of public and institutional understanding of digital assets in Belize, right? What role does places like us, Galen University, what role should we be playing in that? I am delighted that I am hosting this particular program, right? But what really should be our role in that whole enterprise?
Sure. So based on my research, the level of understanding, and just to give you quick context on my thesis, my population or the persons that I reached out to ask these questions and their level of knowledge were mainly registered agents. And based on that, my findings were that the understandings are very limited, the understanding of digital assets in Belize. However, within the financial system, we are learning a lot more. For example, banks, compliance officers, regulators. Within the financial industry, it is definitely improving. However, when it comes to the general public, they still find it confusing, complicated, and of course risky. So it's not something that is people are really aware of or know the benefits that they can bring about. Okay. And when it comes to education, definitely academia is very crucial, right? So what organizations like, associations or universities, associations, regulators, what they can do is, provide courses, for example, which would teach about fintech, blockchain, or digital finance more in depth, more in detail, so as to learn the benefits, but also the downside of them as well. So I believe that would be a good start.
This is the second time for the night that we have heard blockchain. We're going to come back to that because you're going to have to explain that to us. But what I want to follow through on is a question to you, Hero, right? What is the role of Finance Belize, your organization, right?
Sure.
In supporting this awareness and this promotion of digital assets as it evolves?
Sure. Well, let me start by first introducing Finance Belize to our viewers. Again, Finance Belize is a relatively new organization. We were formed in 2023. And really our role is to support the growth and development of the financial services sector in Belize. So our work cuts across several areas, from the securities and capital market to company formation to wealth management, which deals with trusts, foundations. So we cut across several sectors of the financial services economy where we're trying to promote it globally and attract interest. So in terms of the role of Finance Belize, again, when digital assets come on board, which currently we have a sunset clause on it, as shared, there is no regulation in Belize currently for digital assets because the current Financial Services Commission Act has a sunset on it, meaning where it's prohibited until December 31st of this year. But following that, like Gladys mentioned earlier, we do have a virtual asset steering group that's working on a regulation.
You painted it nice, a sunset.
A sunset.
A moratorium.
A moratorium. It's what you call a sunset clause. Yes, correct. So it's a sunset clause on everything digital assets. And I'm putting that in context that by the end of the year, we hope we have at least a draft regulatory framework going into 2026, right? And so the Virtual Asset Steering Group is a comprehensive group with several regulators and stakeholders that are working on this. But the role of Finance Belize following that will be to promote it. So fintech and digital assets is one of our priority sectors that we will work to promote. And again, more heavily in 2026 when there is a regulatory framework in place. But I think more so the role of Finance Belize is not only to promote and to attract interest, but really to create that level of awareness that Gladys was speaking about. So if we can perhaps host, let's say next year, a digital finance week, or try to host more workshops to build awareness nationally, again, that's a part of our work. Because I think out of our 8 priority sectors, really, fintech and digital assets, I would say, is one of the newest ones, as one of the innovators or the innovative sectors of our focus. But once we get there...
You mentioned fintech. Explain that a little bit.
Sure. So fintech is short for financial technology. And currently in Belize, there is already several examples of fintech. You think about our digital wallets. I'm not sure, you may have heard about eCash with Belize Bank or DigiWallet, right?
Yes,
So those
yes.
are some examples of fintech. How are we using financial technology to create better financial inclusion in Belize, right? But the digital asset part, again, like I said, currently there is that sunset clause in our regulations nationally, and so we need to wait until there is a regulatory framework in place before Finance Belize can go out and promote to say that Belize is within the digital asset space, like the Bahamas or like Bermuda or like several examples that you may have read in Gladys's research,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But we are not there yet. Currently, like I said, there is no regulatory framework for digital assets in Belize, but like I said, by the end of the year, we're hoping that we have a draft. Going into next year, again, it will be a new sector of Belize's economy.
Yes. Thank you very much. It's becoming clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer, right? I'm glad I want you to talk about the regulations, right? People want their assets, whether it's digital or otherwise, they want it to be safe. Can you talk to us about what are the stances of the central bank or of the Financial Services Commission in terms of digital assets, right? And these virtual currencies. What is their position?
Sure. And so pretty much they're both taking a very cautious approach and of course responsible at the same time because like Hiro said, we're not there yet. And there is a process that must be followed, right? And I'll speak to the central bank's stance, and then maybe Hiro can chime in more as well on the FSC. As he mentioned, we're both in the virtual asset steering group, so but so that we can share the response. And so overall, the central bank, of course, is being very cautious. I mean, their responsibility is to protect the Belizean dollar. Therefore, as you know, it has been pegged 2-to-1 for over 40 years. So that's their main responsibility and goal and aim is to maintain the a stable economy, right?
But what threat would a digital asset cause to that?
Sure. Well, because of the predictability of some digital assets, for example, the cryptocurrencies, or like as I mentioned earlier, they are so volatile that they can cause instability. So it has to be closely monitored. So whatever new form of money, you can say, that is introduced into the economy has to be very closely monitored by our regulators. And of course, especially if it's something that's going to be generally accepted as a form of payment, it has to be regulated. And of course, the central bank and the FSC, as you're asking, those are the main regulators when it comes to financial institutions. The central bank is a regulator of banks. So you said that the
central bank is cautious. Are they cautiously optimistic, or are they cautiously what's the opposite of optimistic? Are they cautiously
pessimistic?
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily pessimistic. I believe that they're just taking a very, careful approach and just ensuring that there's no sudden movements when. There's a process to follow, right? Yes. So I believe that that's pretty much their stance, that they're working very closely with the FSC, and they are part also of the steering group. The beauty about the steering group is that we have all the stakeholders that should be part of it, including the central bank. I represent the Belize International Financial Services Association. Hiro represents Finance Belize. We have from the Belize Bankers Association as well. So we have all these organizations that are part of the steering group to ensure that everyone chimes in properly and that the right decisions are made and that the correct framework is established and ruled out when the time comes.
Okay. We're going to talk about the risks, some of the risks shortly. But if you could talk to us a little bit about the
Sure.
the other regulatory group, which is the Financial Services Commission.
Sure. And thanks again, Dr. Barrow. But before I go there, I just want to elaborate that I think as Belize moves into the space of digital assets, I think a phased approach is necessary. So we can't be everything to everyone
Yes.
in 1 second. We need to take a phased approach. And I think I don't foresee, and I'm sure the central bank will agree, because we want to maintain that peg to the US dollar, like Gladys mentioned, but we don't foresee, let's say next year, cryptocurrency being a form of exchange
Yes.
or currency in Belize, similar to, let's say, El Salvador, where you have Bitcoin ATMs, or in other countries in the Caribbean. So just to be clear, I think that phase would be much later down the line, even if we get there. But I think the phase we're moving into is where you have virtual assets as a security, or virtual assets being registered in Belize, or, for example, virtual asset service providers. So we have several agents in Belize, and perhaps experts that can provide that service as a virtual asset service provider. So we want to look at what is Belize's niche. I think I want to start there, but just on the central banks, and just to share that, again, it's not an expectation that, you know, we're going to have the cryptocurrency flowing in the market.
Yes.
I think that's just to be clear on that. But on the Financial Services Commission part, that's where, again, the Commission is taking, again, again, similar cautious approach. But I think one of the interesting things is the approach to develop the regulatory framework. The Commission is looking keenly at a sandbox approach. So what is a sandbox? Again, next year we will likely see, for example, maybe 5 to 6 virtual asset firms that can operate in what you call like a test lab environment. So that's really the approach in terms of that the Commission is taking, and the virtual asset steering group, in ensuring that whatever regulatory framework comes out is tested, is proven, and is risk averse, meaning that we don't have something that will jeopardize any type of monetary policy or the peg to the US dollar, just to be clear. So I think
we're taking a scientific approach to this.
Exactly.
Definitely.
It's a good. It sounds like a good idea. You're setting up the structures, testing it to see if it works.
Yes.
Right, and if it works, then we go to the next phase, as you were in fact saying. And if it doesn't work, then we abandon it.
Right. So you're familiar with the scientific approach, and I think that's exactly the test before you move, right?
Yes.
And move cautiously, given the risk, but again, ensure that we don't lose out on the innovation that could be possible. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because indeed it's not like the country is ready to embrace all digital assets. I mean, it is a phased approach. Therefore, we'd have to, start working with those that are the least risky, right? And as we mentioned, so that would be like the stable coins, those that are, backed by real money. So there's no real, or much chance for volatility there when it comes to the dollar, right? So there has to be a systematic approach to this.
So, phase, systematic approach, scientific approach in terms of you test, and if it you make adjustments, and you move forward in that capacity.
And ensuring compliance, and as well as
ensuring
compliance. Yes, it's very important. As well as ensuring that we maintain the good reputation that we've built when it comes to anti-money laundering, counter-financing of terrorism. That's very important for Belize at this moment. So anything that we do, any approach that we take, needs to be in line with that.
How do we rank in
standards.
That anti-money laundering? How do we rank in that?
Very well.
How do we rank in the counter-terrorism, not allowing money to fund terrorism?
Yeah.
Well, very well, actually.
Yeah, maybe I could chime in there. But so in 2025, earlier this year in March, there was a mutual evaluation report that was conducted by the Financial Action Task Force. And we have to pat ourselves on the back for this in the financial system in Belize, because we met 38 out of 40 recommendations, and the 2 that we don't fully meet were highly compliant. So actually, when you look at the... well, I have to go back to the specific ones, but I will say that the main...
So 38 out of 40
point
for
is,
you is good.
Isn't that an A+? I would say that's... Yeah, and globally it is.
Globally it is,
So
yes.
to me... it's a good
great
achievement. And so Belize is really doing well in terms of FATF and global compliance. But again, when you speak about digital assets, we don't want to jeopardize that as well, similar to the peg to the US dollar, the monetary policy. But we have to ensure that we try to maintain. That's why Gladys mentioned compliance is key, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. What are some of those safeguards that you think are needed to ensure that we take advantage of the opportunities, right, the innovations, but at the same time protecting consumers? What are some of those, in your estimation?
Well, definitely, we both agree that Belize has a great opportunity here to, ensure that it comes up to speed with most other countries that have taken the step. And what we need to do is, apart from other things that we mentioned, is that we have to move carefully and, of course, very confidently. And in order to do that, again, there has to be a phased approach, right? So we would have to, I would say, to get there, we would need to start with tiered licensing system, which is what we mentioned earlier. Only a few companies or service providers that would want to work in this space would be allowed to take part of the sandbox approach. And it has to, so that we don't overwhelm ourselves with compliance as well, there has to be different tiers, right? So there would be companies that would be more complex than others. So that needs to be taken into consideration. Apart from that, of course, having all of them under the regulatory sandbox that we mentioned. And further, we would need to continue strengthening our cybersecurity and AML-CFT's frameworks, which we currently have, which is strong. However, bringing in a new service, a financial service, we need to, again, educate, the regulators, the public, all stakeholders need to be educated. And then, of course, just ensure that there is, and I jumped the gun there, but just promote transparency as well as education among all stakeholders. That's extremely important. So I would say those four steps are very crucial.
Oh, interesting. Just before we go to the break, and we have a couple minutes, my good friend Dr. Carol Babb have been spending her time now in terms of financial literacy, and she really cares about inclusion, right? And as educators, we do too, right? That, we want to make sure that this thing is not just for some of us and not as many of us as could possibly be. What are some of the, what should be some of the policymakers' balance kind of policies that they have to think about and work on to ensure financial integrity, of course, but also to ensure that the man at the market is involved, and as well as the big merchant.
Sure. Maybe I could take that one. And really, currently, if you recall the National Financial Inclusion Strategy that was developed in 2019, 34% of Belizeans remain unbanked, meaning without a bank. 34%. As of 2024, I believe that number is now 30%, but don't quote me, we can check the central bank.
3 out of every 10,
exactly.
3 or 4 out of every 10
remain unbanked, right?
Don't have a bank, don't have a bank account.
Exactly. So, but again, the central bank and the financial system has been doing a lot to ensure those persons enter the banking system or are able to access financial services. Now, many times when you read about digital assets, it tells you that, again, this is a way for persons to trade or transfer funds, again, digitally, without the need of going through a central bank. Now, that's often what you would read in research online, etc. But I think what's important, like you said, on the financial inclusion side, is to ensure that our current systems are able to evolve as we progress globally, right? Digital assets will continue to be there, like you said, but for us in Belize, we need to determine what space we're able to use it and to ensure that that 30% ultimately are able to be included. So your question is about the policy makers and how we ensure financial inclusion. I think we need to look at what areas of fintech we can use and digital assets to ensure that that happens. I think a good example, I mean, from my experience in the UN, there were some rural communities, just taking a good example of fintech. And there was a project where we needed to ensure persons in rural communities were able to access funds following, let's say, COVID or even any disaster. And they needed to access it, but again, many of them remain unbanked. And so the way it worked is they utilized DigiWallet. And so the donor provided the funds and they were able to access it through a DigiWallet agent and access their funds there in the rural villages. So again, there's several examples already in Belize.
So there are innovative ways
where
that you could use
fintech is being
technology,
used
for example,
for financial inclusion. Now, how digital assets can be used, again, that is where the regulatory framework and this steering group is now looking at to see what space do we play in. But like I said, for digital assets, it's not that Belize will become everything for everyone. We have to determine the space we play in, right?
Yes.
So.
Well, it's 8:30, so we have to take a break now. So we'll take this break and we will come back and continue this wonderful conversation, focusing on some of the opportunities and some of the risks, and of course some of the challenges that an initiative like this would pose for us. Thank you very much. Break.
My year, my life, my education. Galen University, my choice for excellence in education. Apply today. For more information, email us at admissions@galen.edu.bz or give us a call at 614-6415. Come soar with the Galen Eagles.
At Galen University, specifically in this MBA program, we are trained to be global leaders. We have to start to think beyond the borders of Belize. We have to look at expansion and growth beyond just our local area into regional and, well, the entire world. Because like what was mentioned, right now, the country is a global market. You can do business with anyone, anywhere. You can offer services. You can offer your products to anyone in any part of the world. And so what we are trained to do at Galen is to think globally. So as a business leader, as an administrative person, somebody who needs to make decisions on a daily basis, we need to have to be equipped. And that experience that comes from our facilitators at Galen helps us to think that way and to look beyond what we have locally and how we try to develop our industries.
Thank you very much, and welcome back to the Galen Hour. Tonight we are focusing on digital assets and the whole financial services and the future of the financial services in Belize. And we have discussing this issue two practitioners, right? Two practitioners who are in this space discussing it. Miss Gladys, right, and Mr. Hero. Now we want to talk about opportunities, right? I read Gladys's thesis, right? Very powerful thesis. Enjoyed it, and I'm recommending it to some other people to read. But what are some of the opportunities? What do digital assets create in the Belizean economy, particularly, right, in the financial inclusion, right? We'll talk about that, but also in cross-border transactions. We do a lot of cross-border trading.
Sure. I can take that for sure.
Sure.
Good. Well, so what does it mean is that it can offer Belize real and practical opportunities, right? So as you mentioned, when it comes to financial inclusion, imagine, for example, a fisherman in a remote village, right? That, well, could be, or a small business owner that doesn't really have access to a bank account. And this can be for various reasons. Some of it could be just location, or also the requirements that are every day they're getting increasingly more complicated at times, and some people might not have the documents to open it, right? So they don't have a bank account. But they can have access to a digital wallet where they can access it through their phone. He mentioned earlier a wallet that, the Digi wallet was it, right? That can be used pretty much by anyone. It's easily accessible, and it can serve as a form of payment when it transfers, right? And this is pretty much the digital wallets, going back to blockchain, and you said you wanted to know
Yes.
more
Yeah.
what blockchain is. So it's pretty much is a digital ledger that records transactions, and it ensures that they remain transparent and that they cannot be changed, right? So so it's easily traceable, right? So any transactions that are recorded, let's say in digital wallet, can be traced. It can't be changed. So so yes, that's pretty much what blockchain is. So going back, financial inclusion, that's how it would affect, or it would help Belizeans. When it comes to cross-border payments, in my research, I mentioned how expensive it was for remittances, right? So, for example, sending a $200 transfer from the U.S. to Belize, it would cost probably 4 or 5% of that. And so, if we can start using these digital, wallets, then we would be pretty much saving. It would cost less than 2%.
It will cost less.
Less than 2%. So now that means more money would stay within Belize, right? There would be more money to spend. So that's how it would help the economy. And then there's, of course, what this new financial service, if we start offering soon, it would bring new jobs, new opportunities for Belizeans. It would definitely, if we are able to implement this properly, we will be looked at as a well-regulated jurisdiction that is welcoming to these types of businesses. Therefore, more companies would want to be incorporated here to offer this service, right? So that is how, and as a result, would create more jobs for Belizeans. So that's very important to keep in mind on how we can benefit from this.
I like that example that you gave in terms of remittances. What about how this helps small businesses and startups?
Okay, sure. I mean, if you really think about the digital asset realm and digital finance, it would help small businesses to have a new way to transact. If, again, we reach that point where, like we mentioned, like other countries, where it's accepted as national tender. So think about a tour guide in San Pedro, and maybe he meets someone that owns a portion of a digital asset. Let's say, I don't know, he wants to pay for his tour using Bitcoin. Again, we're not there yet, but think about it that way, that it will be a form of payment if we get there. But another way I think that's more practical is in raising capital. I think there are also examples of tokenized crowdfunding, for example, where, let's say...
What is that, tokenized?
Tokenized crowdfunding. So let me start with crowdfunding, right? So you may have heard of different platforms like Kiva or other platforms where, let's say you have a business idea and you post it online, but one investor can't have enough. Let's say you need $50,000, right? But one investor can't invest that fully. You get different investors to come in online, they like your business idea, and they would then invest. That's what's called crowdfunding. But tokenized crowdfunding now is, again, where they would invest using digital assets, right? So instead of, let's say you get 50 people to invest that 50,000 online, you post your business idea, that's crowdfunding, meaning you're not going to a bank, but you're raising your funds, by investors crowding into your idea, right? And they're putting in funds. But when you take it to the digital asset area, that would mean that they're investing using digital assets, really. Okay. So I think there are different ideas there. I think for entrepreneurs to look at using blockchain technology, but also using digital asset technology and fintech, like we said. There are a lot of ideas out there, but I think really determining what is possible will be again coming back to the regulatory framework that comes in.
Well, those are the wonderful ideas. Those are the opportunities. What about some of the risks, right? What are some of the key risks associated with introducing or expanding digital assets in Belize, from your perspective? Gladys?
Oh, sure. Try yours. Well, there are many. As I mentioned earlier, definitely there has to be a phased approach, and we need to know what type of virtual assets we want to start working with. Mainly because, of course, we want to maintain the integrity and the value of our Belize dollar. So anything that we do, of course, reputational risk is another one. So anything that we do has to be, very methodical. We have to be very risk adverse as we move along. So we need to just take things slow, ensure that we do our research properly, and that we remain compliant throughout the way. And so I would say mainly the main risk would be that, the reputational risk that can be brought to the country if we don't do it correctly.
Okay. Institutions, right? Institutions, Belize's financial institutions and IT infrastructure. Are we ready to handle digital assets, transactions, security?
I mean, if I were to answer that now, I would say I don't feel we're fully ready, but I think we're taking steps to get there. I think Gladys, more so coming from her international banking experience, would tell you that I'm sure several banks have really invested in their systems to ensure they can prevent cybercrime, ensure they can prevent data breaches, right? And so I think there has been a lot of investments in that area. But I think if we go into the full digital asset realm, I think we have to invest more in that type of security within our institutions, not only within the regulators, but as you mentioned, within financial service providers. Because again, you're going fully online, you're going fully digital, and we would need to ensure our systems can be in place, right? But I think one of the things I wanted to touch on, going back to your previous question on risk, cybersecurity is a risk, data is a risk, and I think frauds and scams, right? Because I think if you look at the value of cryptocurrency, maybe the popular
cybersecurity, data, fraud, and scams.
Yeah, fraud and scams. Yeah, I think, I always say I speak to investors a lot in my career, and I always say if something is too good to be true, don't believe it, right? And so I think if someone comes to you tomorrow, let's say, and tells you, Dr. Barrow, come and invest in this digital asset with me, I guarantee 2 times the return or 5 times the return, you need to ensure you can look at those red flags. Now, not to say it's impossible, because I think, Bitcoin has seen its fair share of fluctuations and other digital assets and cryptocurrencies. I think currently the value is at 110,000 US, for 1 Bitcoin. I mean, you think about where it started to where it is now, but I think it goes back to the point that these fluctuations are risks that need to be managed, but also going back to your question about ensuring our systems are ready. I think that requires investment, both in educational capacity and skill sets, but also in the digital systems and the technology that we need to have in Belize. Right? So.
Yes, you touch on an important point that I'd like Gladys to just elaborate on in terms of the role that digital literacy play in mitigating some of these risks that we've been talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you picked up on many things that I missed. But yeah, so apart from, of course, the market volatility, there's the cybercrime and scams, and these are just they're growing increasingly, right? And as he mentioned, most financial institutions have already started investing in this, however, not to the level or as it relates directly to digital assets. Therefore, it's very important that as we phase out or as we look into implementing a framework, that we take these risks into consideration, as well as operational, because the systems have to be adequate as well, right? And also just enhance the regulatory capacity so that what it is that we're implementing is being regulated properly, right? And then and of course there has to be strong collaboration between all of the regulators. And the way that we can mitigate this risk would definitely be through public education, and this can be via public awareness campaigns that can be provided to the general public, to help them to understand the risk and how they can spot these, scams as they come along, so that they can, because it's very important that we protect our people, right? That they know, again, that it's a new service, but that it will not damage anyone in our society, right?
Yeah.
And as well as mandatory disclosures, it's very important. There has to be, as I mentioned earlier, what the blockchain is. It has to be easily traceable. It has to be easily monitored and disclosed properly, right? So anybody should be able to have access to this. And as well as there should be partnerships with the tech platforms as well, those that are introduced within Belize. So all of these, these techniques are like this would definitely help to counteract the risk.
Yeah. Beautiful. Hero, do you foresee collaboration between traditional banks and you're the one who constantly bring up the fintech startups. Do you see in the future collaboration between what we know now and are comfortable with, the traditional banking system, and this new space that will be created in part by financial technology?
Yeah. I mean, I could answer your question by saying if we don't adapt, we get left behind. I think I'll start by saying that. I mean, the traditional banks in the banking sense have already had to adapt. I mean, you look at physical fiat currency, or currency recently being updated, but you have, let's say, take the example of Belize Bank that has evolved to have a e-wallet, right? A digital form of payment. But I mean, the good part is now we have the app system that allows seamless transfers between banks. I think there's a lot of investment that the traditional banking system has done to utilize technology in a safe way. But I think with fintech startups, and fintech itself, it's disruption, right? It's about innovation. And so when you're asking a question, if they have to work together, I guess it's not a question of if they have to, but eventually they will have to, because as more disruptors enter the market, and again, you know that Belize, we recently had the Belize Investment Summit, where, you have several investments in the services sector. BPOs is a growing area with all the call centers and technology that they utilize. But I think when you look at it, new sectors come, they disrupt the economy, and then we have to catch up. But now I think with digital assets, one thing I can say, we're being a bit more proactive, where we know the market is there, but we want to approach it cautiously by having the regulation first before we open the market, right? But I think fintech and these areas, again, they are disruptors. So for me, it's about working together to ensure, like Gladys said, we maintain compliance and we don't jeopardize our financial economy. I think that's the main area. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of the program. I have a couple more questions that I really and truly need to ask you. The first one is to you, Gladys, right? Could Belize realistically implement? In your thesis, you made reference to a particular country where the central bank had a digital currency. Do you think that Belize could possibly do that in the future?
I do believe so. I do believe that it's actually one of the safest approaches to embracing digital assets. However, because of the importance of maintaining the the dollar pegged and to avoid any volatility in our economy, we would have to. I mean, that would be the approach. That would be the best approach, right? Because we would ensure that it is being controlled by the central bank. And based on my interview with an executive at the central bank, he was open to it. They said that they've actually had been looking into something like this eventually, but it's not something that will be in the short term. But if they were to look at virtual assets, that would probably be a good start. So I do see it being very something that can be embraced, yes, by the central bank.
Is that a view that you share, that that would be the best
So
of the options that we have?
I would say once we approach it cautiously with strong regulations, I think, and with enough public education. But I think we have examples around us, Dr. Barrow, in the Caribbean. I think you may have read in your thesis, I'm sure, the Bahamas, Sand Dollar. Jamaica has this one called Jamdex, and I think the Eastern
Is that
Caribbean,
controlled by the central bank in Jamaica too?
right?
Yes.
Those are examples of CBDCs that exist in the Caribbean region already. But again, I think the Eastern Caribbean one is called Dcash. Dcash, yeah,
so.
Dcash,
Yes.
digital cash, right? So again, those are digital currencies backed by a central bank. But again, for us to know, I think it's best that we look at those examples, learn before we move. I think you have to look at the difference. I mean, many of these economies have floating currencies, but for us, like Gladys said, the Belize dollar has been pegged for over 40 years, and that's something we need to look at closely.
Yeah.
Before,
Because
so
that would be
I am,
difficult
yeah,
to
I think I'll go back to,
sell.
I'm cautiously optimistic.
Okay, so that is movement. That is more than motion. That is movement.
I mean, it's not going to happen anytime soon,
Yes,
as in
yes.
it'll be a process, but I do see eventually.
Yeah.
So what do you envision, Hero, right, for the future of digital assets in Belize over the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay. So, well, again, coming from Finance Belize, I'm here to support the growth, or our organization is to support the growth of the financial services sector. And it being a new area, I think, it will draw attention to Belize as we go into next year, if we have a regulatory framework. So for me, I see it as an opportunity. And like I said, we're optimistic that digital assets can become another contributor to the economy. Like Gladys said, ultimately it's about creating more jobs, creating opportunities for Belizean entrepreneurs, and even the unbanked. I go back to that financial inclusion part. So for me, it's important to ensure we keep those goals in mind. Ultimately, as we move into the digital asset space, how can Belize gain? How can we gain economically from it, but not jeopardize or take any major risk that can affect, one, our status as a global leader in compliance, and two, any part of our economy in terms of our financial stability. So I think for me, it presents a great opportunity for investment and for financial growth. But I think, again, it has to be managed and ensure that we have all our ducks in a row as we move ahead. Yeah.
And the last question. You got the first question and the last question. Last one. What would success look like for Belize in the digital financial space? Ms. Gladys, what would it look like from your lenses?
Well, for me, success would mean that we would find our own rhythm, that, in this digital transformation, that we would do things in a way that is safe, and that we would continue to safeguard, what we are, the reputation that we've managed to secure when it comes to AML, globally. So definitely it would mean that finding our own rhythm. It would mean that eventually we would have more modern regulatory system that would be able to cater to these new services. Where small businesses would be able to access digital tools and be able to grow, and that they will be easily accessible to them. And this could be in the form of online payments, as I mentioned, which we are, doing very well, but in the form of, the wallets, like I mentioned earlier. And then, where Belizeans abroad would be able to send funds to Belize less costly, and that our financial institutions would, continue to remain trusted and globally respected. That is extremely important. And also just, in short, I guess success would be for Belize to become digitally ready, innovation friendly, and just to continue progressing with prudence.
Yeah, I like that vision. I like that vision of of being innovation driven and digitally ready. I really like that. I'd like to, on behalf of Galen University, really, really thank you for being the guest for tonight's session. As we conclude tonight's insightful discussion, it is clear to me that Belize stands at a pivotal moment in its financial journey. The possibilities that digital assets and innovative technologies present are immense. They can be a very inclusive tool. They can be used to support entrepreneurs and opening doors to new opportunities for economic growth. However, as we pointed out, with these opportunities comes some responsibility, right? We need strong regulatory framework. So I'm going to be following you guys, especially as you move towards the end of the year, with the relevant authorities in terms of that. Because if this thing is going to work, strong regulatory framework to me is a critical part. The cybersecurity measures that was mentioned, and of course widespread financial literacy, and that's kind of where we come in terms of helping you with that. So I'd like to thank you very much for informing me and informing the nation
Thank you.
on this wonderful opportunity that Belize has, and we will fight with you to ensure that it embraces it.
Great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Well, that brings us to the end of this show, right? I'd like to say that you join us at the same time, same place, next week, Wednesday, right? For another edition of the Galen Hour. Good night.